Okay, we're back with another game in our speedrun series. So this time we have quite a strong opponent with the black pieces, 1473. Definitely once you're hitting close to 1500, that's more like intermediate level. Like strong intermediate level even. We're well past beginner level. So we'll go for the Molton and Pirc structure, again in this particular move order. Bishop to g5. Okay, I'm still going to play the move pawn to d6. Pawn to h3. So this is quite a different move order. I haven't seen this before. So our opponent is trying to stop us from pushing our e-pawn by putting pressure on this pin. I'm going to develop the knight anyways to this square, attacking the pawn on h3. Now this is already a slightly more dangerous setup than what our opponents have been doing previously. So instead of going knight f3, they've brought the bishop out to a much more dangerous square. Just curious though, I'm just going to play h6 perhaps just to see if white in fact gives up the bishop for this this knight. I don't think they will, but just curious. Yeah, so we see the big difference here. Before our opponent was always giving up this bishop on f6, but now our opponent is no longer doing that. They're sort of starting to value the bishop pair a little bit more, bringing this bishop back to e3. Now h6, by the way, wasn't a good move. I was sort of just trying to see if my opponent would capture or not. Okay, so let's continue with our normal Pirc plans. So our normal plans is to play either c6 and then maybe start pushing on the queen side. This is a very normal way of playing. Sometimes you can play a6. We can also go for e5. Have a lot of different plans we can choose from. But this is by far the most popular and sort of the standard plan of just playing c6, knight to d7, and pushing either b5 or e5. Bishop to e2. So I'm just curious which side my opponent is intending to castle the king. They're going queen side, they're going king side. So do we want to go for e5 or do we want to go for b5? b5 is well met by a3. Since that white hasn't committed the king, I have no idea where the king is going yet. We'll just wait. We'll play knight d7, maybe go for e5 first. If they go queenside, then I'll play pawn to b5 and start attacking there. But for now, there's no indications that they're going to go queenside just yet. So I'm just going to wait. Okay, so after knight f3, my opponent is sort of threatening to play e5. So I need to stop e5 because otherwise e5 will come and then maybe e6 to undermine my pawn structure. So we'll play the move pawn to e5 here. I want to hold off from castling as well, because if I castle a little bit too early, because I've already pushed my pawn to h6, then I might run into some problems when my opponent plays like some g4, h4 and starts attacking my king. So I just want to be a little bit careful of that. Make sure that I don't run into any unnecessary attacks. Also, that I capture with the pawn just to make sure I control a few more squares towards the center of the board. Now white has to decide what's he doing with the king. He's delayed castling for quite a while, and now he's probably hinting at queenside castles. Yeah, he's hinting at going queenside. So do I want my opponent to go queenside, or do I want to scare them away? If I want to scare them away, I play b5, and probably he's not going to go queenside anymore because these pawns are going to be pushed up. Not necessarily I want to do that, so I'm just going to go queen e7. And then maybe after castles queenside, I'll play b5. If a3, then I'll play a5. Perhaps something like this. So white still a little bit unsure with the king. Seems like white is hesitating which side to put the king. White does have the advantage in that I've pushed h6 a little bit early, and then I can't castle kingside now because of that. So this is a plus for white. I need to eventually solve this problem of pushing h6 too early, find a way to get my king to safety. There's always this plan of playing king f8, king g8, king h7. It's a little bit slower. I can also push the pawn to h5, but then I give away this g5 square, which can be very annoying later on. So our opponent's gone kingside, which is, I think, a very sensible idea. So we have a slight problem here. Just a problem with our king. That's really the only issue. If we didn't have played h6, we didn't play h6, then we wouldn't have had any issues here. But yeah, because of this h6 move, now we have some problems. And it's not that easy to solve. I can play knight c5, counterattacking this pawn on e4, but then he just plays bishop to d3. But then maybe, if I can force the bishop to d3, once I play knight h5, there'll be no more attack on this knight on h5 from that bishop on e2. So maybe I go knight to c5, counterattacking this pawn on e4. Now I force bishop to d3 pretty much, and then maybe now, because the pawn is pushed to h3, my plan can be to play knight to h5, knight to e6, knight to f4. So this is a very typical maneuver which you should keep in mind in a lot of these type of, especially King's Indian type of positions, but also, of course, the Pirc. Sometimes you can get this maneuver, especially with the pawn on e5, to get your knight to f4. And when they've pushed the pawn to h3, then this f4 square can become a whole lot weaker. Of course, white doesn't want to give up the bishop. If he gives up the bishop, then I'm very, very happy, because I don't have any problems at all anymore. With my pawn on h6, I can castle, and I also get the two bishops. But white is playing this move instead. So white's just sacrificing the pawn. So why can't I just take it? So if I take the pawn, knight takes, well, queen d3 is the only move which attacks the pawn, attacks the knight, and then if I move my knight back. So if I move my knight back there, maybe bishop c5 is the threat. Bishop c5 might be the issue, and then this rook and queen has this dangerous battery on the back rank. So if you don't see anything wrong with a capture, then I think you just capture and then say, you know, show me that there's something in this position. So I'm just going to go knight takes e4. So we capture back now. Okay, queen d3. Okay, so I see the idea. So if knight f6, bishop c5, and then if I take it, then there's a back rank. But I do have this move bishop to f5 as well, which I'm not sure if my opponent considered this move. So after the move bishop to f5, I threaten some sort of discovered attack against the white queen. And also now, since the queen has moved away from h6, I have the freedom to castle on the next move. So this sacrifice also doesn't quite work anymore because now my rook is in the game. So my rook is defending this d8 square. So there's no longer any checkmating threats along the d file. So yeah, white has gone queen to b3, but now I can just safely castle my king, and there should be no problems whatsoever. I'm also a pawn up in this position now. So yeah, I can probably just move my bishop, attacking the queen at the same time. I do have to be a little bit careful where I put my knight next move though. If the queen goes to a4, if I play knight to c5, then queen to b4 might be an issue because of this pin. If I go knight to d6, then bishop to c5 might be a problem. So yeah, I do have to be a little bit careful here. Knight c5 is probably still fine though. I can still play it because after queen b4 I have b6. I can also play the move knight to f6. If knight takes e5, then or maybe you can take on e5 in that position. Okay, I'm just gonna play. Let's play knight to c5. If queen to b4, I just play pawn to b6. Also defend this e5 pawn with my bishop. There's also knight g5 actually, that was another option. Possibly knight g5 might have been better. Not sure, actually this is probably fine. Okay, so giving me the bishop, I'm just going to take the bishop. So if rook takes, then I have pawn to e4, forking the pieces. Here I play b6 because the threat was bishop c5 and skewering my queen. Okay, this one, attacking my pawn here, attacking my pawn here. I can push e4 perhaps, but I don't think it quite works. Push e4, maybe bishop to d4. I'm just going to play bishop to d5, very simple move. Just defending this pawn, defending this pawn. Yeah, so the knight wants to get into this g4 square, it seems like. So I'm just going to completely stop that with the move pawn to f5. So stopping your opponent's ideas is very, very important, especially if it allows some counterplay, especially if you're already better. So now after that move, he removes a lot of squares from the bishop. So he actually traps the bishop with the move pawn to f4. And now the bishop on e3 has no squares to go to. And yeah, so that one definitely was felt like a lot harder than the previous games, mainly because white kept that bishop and didn't exchange it off. So again, after here, h6 isn't the best move, by the way. I probably wouldn't play h6. It's just I was curious whether white would capture the knight, but white did not capture the knight. And now after the move pawn to c6, which is one of the plans for black, knight to d7, a queen a5 is also a very interesting move in some of these positions in the Pirc, where you go queen e5, threatening e5. The queen supports this pawn push, but e5 stops white from pushing. So it's very important that you do that, because let's say you play b5, then e5 is very, very strong. So after move pawn to b5, pawn to e5 would hit your knight, and now you're in a whole lot of trouble here as black. So you want to be very, very careful of this move when playing the Pirc. So e5 is important here. Takes, queen d2, queen e7. So the idea with knight c5 is I wanted to attack the pawn to kind of distract white away. So here, if white plays bishop to d3, which was what I was expecting, my idea was to go knight h5. And after the move knight h5, let's say white moves the rook again, I was going to play knight to e6 and then maneuver this knight into f4. Once it gets to f4, it's very hard to get rid of. So let's say the knight gets into f4 square. It's hard to get rid of, and also since you can't play g3, and also if you ever take the knight, then you have to give up your bishop again, and otherwise black is castling next move, and because the knight blocks the bishop from this pawn. So after rook to d1, knight takes e4, takes. Yeah, so I think the idea from white is that if I go knight to c f6, then double question mark, bishop c5, excellent move. Actually, it's a brilliant move. So it would have been a brilliant move there with bishop c5. Now the idea is if I take it, of course I get back rank checkmated with queen d8. And if I don't take it, then, well, I'm never going to get castled now. And I mean, the bishop can even come into the d6 square, but actually white can just take the pawn as well, which is even better because I can't capture it because of back rank mate. So same problems. So after bishop f5 though, I'm threatening a discovered check. So if white goes g4, discovered attack, sorry, then I have knight takes f2, and I have a double attack. So the knight is attacking the queen, I'm also attacking the pawn, and the bishop's also attacking the queen. So white's going to be losing a lot of material, not to mention the rook is hanging. But once black is able to get castled, then the rest of the game is just managing to consolidate, and then black can start pushing the pawns and using that bishop advantage. So I hope you enjoyed this game, and thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next one.